I did see that, Homesteader. I did. That was... It is really amazing how completely out of touch those in power are, whether it be politicians or CEOs. Just no clue what the actual cost of living is at all. A lot of them are just, they're living in the heyday of the 1950s economy. But speaking of South America, I would be remiss if I did not mention what's going on in Colombia. Colombia attempted to get a nationwide strike going on, and you know, a number of people did join into it and to protest, demanding such unreasonable things as healthcare and a better education system and improvements to the pension program. So, of course, they were met with all kinds of police violence. So, yeah, that is another country where workers recognized, hey, we're kind of getting fucked. And we should do something about it. And decided to do the only thing that workers can, which is to try and organize strike. And the state responded in the way that capitalist states are beginning to on the regular, which is just to try and suppress them. Yeah, the protests themselves were huge. The protesters themselves were peaceful until attacked, which is how it goes again and again and again. They're another group that I hope is able to keep it up and keep that pressure up. Right, even when they're not peaceful, it's often because of the sheer magnitude of the injustice. Exactly. But from my own experience anyway, demonstrations are loud, they are rowdy, they are deliberately trying to draw attention, so they have to be. At some point, escalation is forced upon them by the state that's trying to shut them down. Exactly, Shalyn. That is precisely what happens. And that's if they even want to be want to wait for the shot back. Sometimes they just open up and, you know, do some clever editing for media coverage and say, oh, look at how chaotic this scene is with no context. It looks chaotic, doesn't it? Doesn't it alarm you? Aren't you alarmed? And, oh yeah, Israel's one I was talking about in the Discord a bit. And it's I remain convinced that that partition plan was I don't know if it was like premeditated or malicious or just ignorant, but just the layout of everything there really seems to try to maximize border conflict. The partition plan is the 1947 plan that drew the initial borders of Israel and Palestine. And let me bring that up quick, just so you can see what I'm talking about here, because it's honestly absurd. And if you look at it from a strategic perspective, it only makes sense that it will lead to conflict. This is the partition plan off of Wikipedia. And I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, because a few things here bear recognition. Okay, so first of all, we have this semi-contiguous section of the Jewish state of Israel, which affords them a certain degree of logistical independence, but not quite. What it does do, and this is the important part, following the roads, it creates incentive to seize certain roads for both sides of this. Like if you look down here, like if you live here, you know, or here, and you have family over here or work over here, and you constantly have to pass through a checkpoint going through a state that you are kind of in conflict with, or you need to constantly have shipments of things between these areas, it demands that you try to secure that road. Down here, we've got this little city, and it has all these connections out. And then you've got these isolated cities, and they can't go anywhere without going through there. Well, what does this do? Like, what does this actually do? It forces border conflict. I'm not even trying to get into, like, the Israel-Hamas thing is a whole other mess. I'm just wanting to focus on this plan, and it couldn't end any other way. Like, Tel Aviv is right here. This is part of the Palestinian state, completely surrounded by Israel. How do you design something like this without... Neither of these states can independently operate. They de facto rely on the cooperation of one another just to be able to supply their own cities and to move their own civilians through their own territories. And when this was set up, they knew that both Palestine and Israel were not cooperative states, were not cooperative, government agencies. So drawing a border like this, which necessitates the cooperation of both of these states just for logistical purposes, it could not end any other way. That's my take. I don't think that gets talked about enough in this conflict. That doesn't really address what a solution would be, but it does at least identify some of the underlying problems, which continue to not be addressed. Like, even some of this talk about, well, you know, they just need to respect the West Bank. Well, what does that mean without creating meaningful infrastructure, creating contiguous states where they can operate supply lines within their own contiguous borders? It doesn't mean anything. This is the thing I get caught up on, because what I do for work a lot is transportation planning. This is my wheelhouse. And like, even in the United States, okay, could you imagine if the border of Mexico and Texas had a configuration like this, where we had, you know, one of the southernmost Texas cities completely surrounded by Mexico? And when we had friction with Mexico, or we had like with COVID where we had lockdowns and stuff, like, that would create even more conflict between us and our neighbor, just having that border gore, because it creates logistical nightmares. Yes. Yes, we did. I don't remember exactly where, but I know I did read that. It was up in the northeast area, wasn't it? Like the Nova Scotia type area, not Nova Scotia itself, but oh, Michigan. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Michigan. It could have been a couple different places, honestly. Anything like that where... And also, while we're on the subject of border gore and these sorts of logistical nightmare issues, let's talk about how reservations are cut up. Yeah, I would agree that most civilians, they don't want anything to do with it. They just want to be able to live their life and move and do their thing. That is the default position for civilians. We just really want to be left the fuck alone. And you're entirely correct. If we definitely need worker solidarity and coalition building. Unfortunately, none of those things are actually easy. They require a lot of work and a lot more buy-in from a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of that is... People are so kept so impoverished and just living week to week that they really don't have the time to really understand their own situation. And yeah, so they're just, the most understanding of their world that they get is propaganda, is whatever the state is pushing or tolerating in the media. And you know, I don't care. If you're in a capitalist nation and you think that your press is truly free, you are deluding yourself. It is not to say that every place media is as bad as Russia, but they all have an extreme pro-capitalist, pro-state bias. I'm old too. I'm not good with memes. I don't understand memes most of the time, but memes are everywhere. Yeah, keep people busy, keep them fairly poor, make them worried about their survival day to day, and they will never be able to organize to challenge your power. That is a very good strategy. Until it isn't. It is. And the mythology of you could be a millionaire is powerful. I think that the myth is starting to show cracks in younger generations. Because, you know, millennials, certainly a lot of millennials bought into it. Gen Xers even more so. Gen Z, you know, I think it's starting to wane with millennials, and it's really dropped off with Gen Z, who are just like, me, a millionaire? Not in this economy. As the distance between those who actually had class mobility and each new generation that doesn't grows, I think the myth is just dissolving. Yeah, yes. It would not only make workers more comfortable, but they would stop being able to glean all of the profits away from the workers and pocket all of it for themselves, which is just... when you have so much money that you adding another million means nothing to you, like, why do they... Oh, it's disgusting how they just keep wanting more, like, just gluttons. You think money will exist by the time I hit retirement age, lol? Yeah. Gen Z seems to be the most have the most realistic understanding of the state of economy as things. That is so weird to me. I don't understand the mindset. It would be interesting to see a psychological study on that. Just I don't know if one exists, but just where that hoarder mindset really picks up, because like I couldn't fathom needing at any point more than like 2 million. That's more money than I could conceive of needing to spend ever. Yes, I know you would spend more than that, but like if you put that in the bank, you would just literally be able to survive off interest, period, de facto, for indefinitely. With zero risk. And some of these guys are like, I have only $200 billion. I need all of them. Hell. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. The hoarding of properties is a nightmare as well. The forced shortages of, and the way it creates price fixing is completely grotesque. You have developments created where it's just like, yeah, here's this subdevelopment full of empty houses, never mind the homeless population. We're just going to sit on them because we can, because we want to sell them for like $500,000 each. 3-bedroom houses. My own house is absurdly valued now at like 250. It was 90 when I bought it. And that's just because properties are being bought up here like crazy in Central Florida. Not by people. No, not by people, but just by landlords who want to own it all and And I keep getting contacted by landlords who are like, do you want to sell your house for cash now? Sell your house for cash now. So I can pin people to the wall with it in perpetuity. Consider what kind of mindset a person has to be to have... Yeah. Cash for your liberty. Oh, God. Person you knew got a government contract. They no longer work, but make like $2.5 million per year from the company after the board got sick of the... What the hell? That's wild. That is a... I don't even know what to do with that, but yeah, if you're on the board of a company, you can be paid off in really weird ways. While contributing nothing a lot of the times, most of the time. Certainly not what board members are paid. Yeah, they still get paid for that nothing. Yeah. And you know, I'm all for pensions, but not like that. Not like that. I agree with you, Johnny. I like the way that you think. The board of a company should be every worker who's been there for a year. If you do your time, welcome aboard. And yeah, you get your share of the company. I think that's totally reasonable. I don't know if it has to do with rationalizing guilt. I mean, like was mentioned earlier, a lot of these folks don't seem to have any comprehension of how the rest of the world lives.